Astonishing Legends would like to thank the Great Courses Plus, Best Fiends, Squarespace, Mint Mobile, Miller High Life, our contributors at patreon.com, and you, our listeners, for making tonight's show possible.
Robert Rackstraw, Kenneth Christensen, Sheridan Peterson, Lynn Doyle Cooper, Dwayne Weber, Joseph S. Lockage, William Gossett, John List, Ted Mayfield, Richard Floyd McCoy, Barb Dayton. Just a dozen of the people on the list of hundreds of DB Cooper suspects, each one with at least one bit of compelling information pointing the finger at them. It's hard to know where to begin when diving into the topic of part 2 of our series on Mr. Cooper, if that is his real name. And we're leaning away from a 6-part series on it, so tonight we're going to do our best to give you that 10,000-foot view, a carefully planned metaphor of all the players, and to the best of our ability, leave you with the information you need to make your own suspect list. There are so many questions to weigh. The obvious ones, like, who was DB Cooper? Why did he do this? Where did he go after he jumped out of that 727? What was his motive and opportunity? Was he a master planner or just a mediocre one who got lucky? Did he have military experience? Was he a career criminal or con man? Or just another civilian who snapped and pulled off one of the greatest heists in history? We'll look at all of that while being respectful to those who've been neck deep in this for decades. This is not our first rodeo on an investigation with this much interest in it, and we've learned the hard way that Johnny-come-latelys can ruffle some feathers, but sometimes it's good to have fresh eyes on something. We may not have the benefit of years of research on this particular topic. Still, we do have almost 200 episodes of shows with many on similar topics, and that gives us the unique position of having seen what these types of investigations look like. The sociological patterns of behavior among researchers in mysteries like this are often quite similar and can inform the legend's overview. Tonight, we'll do our best to talk further about the aftermath of Mr. Cooper's departure from Flight 305 and represent as many theories on suspects as we can fit into just a few hours. So let's jump into the void and see what we can find. Scratch that. We had too much information. Tonight, we'll talk about the investigation. Next week, which was supposed to be dark, we'll release a commercial-free bonus final part on the suspects.
Welcome back to Astonishing Legends. I'm Scott Philbrook, and this is Forrest Burgess.
Take this down. I want $200,000 by 5 p.m. in cash. Put it in a knapsack. I want 2 back parachutes and 2 front parachutes. When we land, I want a fuel truck ready to refuel. No funny stuff, or I'll do the job. Dan Cooper to Flight Attendant Florence Shafter on November 24th, 1971.
Join us tonight for part 2 of 3 in our series on the infamous skyjacker, DB Cooper.
And we're back, and quite frankly gobsmacked.
Oh, what country is that? Are you
No,
doing
it's
somebody there?
nothing.
Is it Craig Ferguson?
Yeah,
No?
it's a bad me impression.
Oh, okay.
It's nobody, so you can't say I do a terrible impression of whomever.
Well, I tell you what, we are gobsmacked. I felt like that was the right word to say there. I got to be honest. I never dreamed we would raise this much, but thanks to your orders of the charity t-shirts for the Kecksburg Volunteer Fire Department 2020 UFO Festival, which of course officially never happened, we have raised nearly a whopping $7,000 for them. I honestly can't believe it. I figured we'd raise a few hundred, maybe 1,000, but you people have gone above and beyond.
Wow, that's fantastic. You know, it really touches our hearts to know how great our listeners are, and you folks should know that you've done a good thing here. Listen to what our friend, guest for the Kecksburg show and director of the UFO Festival, Ron Struble, said when we told him how much was coming his way.
Hey, Ron?
Yes.
We've been looking at our numbers on those t-shirts. I kind of can't believe it. As of yesterday, it was $6,800.
Holy mackerel.
Yeah.
This is unbelievable.
Our listeners have really came through. They've just been buying them like hotcakes. We're going to announce them that they're on sale one more time here this week in the show that's going up this weekend. So we may sell a few more of them. But I just wanted to let you know that you're going to have that money coming in and by the middle of October.
Unbelievable. I can't thank you enough. Honest to God. This is like a godsend.
It's our pleasure. And we wanted to, and I think our listeners too wanted to help you guys out this year, especially having to cancel the festival and everything. So we hope you guys can put it to good use.
Oh, my God. Can't thank you enough for reaching out to us and getting us involved. And this is fantastic. Thank you.
That's all on you, folks. You really made that happen. So thank you on behalf of Ron Struble and the Kecksburg Volunteer Fire Department. And also thank you for showing the world how great our listenership is. You really never cease to amaze us.
Yes, and that shirt will be on sale until October 1st. But after that, we're ending the first and what may be the only run for it. So if you haven't gotten one yet and want to get one, you still have a week or two here. So visit bit.do/Kecksburg shirt. And Kecksburg shirt is all one word, right, Scott?
That's right.
Yes, Kecksburg.
How else would you spell Kecksburg?
One more time, visit bit.do/Kecksburg shirt. Kecksburg with a U. Or just go to theastonishinglegends.com, click on store, and you'll find it there too.
On another note, and something we don't mention often, we wanted to say a very heartfelt hello to the nearly 12,000 people now in our private Facebook group, as well as the almost 20,000 following our main Facebook page. We are humbled by the interest in the show. So we really wanted to thank you guys, and not to mention all our followers on Instagram and Twitter as well, which is all about in the same range. It's probably all the same people. I don't know.
Indeed. And our hats off in fond respect to our admins who keep both of those places, well, all the places really, wonderful groups to be a part of in a time where that can be hard to find online. So thanks, team, for that.
Okay, on to some other very important news. We are coming into the spooky season and we need to get ready. We were supposed to be dark the next 2 weeks, but we had so much DB Cooper stuff to talk about that we made that series a 3-parter. So that third part's going to come out next week with no commercials because we didn't have time to put any in there. So you guys can enjoy that. Then we'll be dark the week after that and returning with the first of 3 shows in a row for October.
However, that's not the only thing that's happening for October. In fact, some things are changing here in the home offices, and those changes are all rolling out by the morning of October 1st.
Yeah, a lot of stuff is happening, and October seemed to be the time to do it because, well, we started the show back in October 2014, and now it's going to be 6 years old, if you can believe that. Yeah, it's crazy. But we thought maybe it was time to spruce up the place a little bit. The curtains are getting kind of tattered.
All right, that's it. That's all we're going to say for tonight. But keep an ear on the Astonishing Legends feed during these dark weeks, for a special announcement from us explaining things. It's really too much to go into here, so make sure and stream or download the brief announcement that will likely drop very close to the end of the month for subscribers.
Yeah, that's funny you should say. You know what's kind of crazy?
No, what is crazy?
I don't think we ever tell people to subscribe to the show. Is that dumb? Should we be doing that?
Doesn't matter. I mean, is it Apple? Are we going to shoot up the Apple charts?
I know. Yeah, we're still waiting for that hockey stick of growth. It's just been slow and steady, right, since we started.
Well, go ahead then. Yeah, just do it. Just go ahead and subscribe. You might as well. If you've been listening this long.
Yeah, if you've been listening a few times and you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to Astonishing Legends wherever you get your podcasts, including but not limited to the Apple Podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and just pretty much everywhere. I think we're everywhere.
All right, it's time now to freefall into the rest of the story of DB Cooper.
I thought we wanted to go for that fast open, not a lot of free fall time. You just pull it right when you jump out.
It's a metaphor, you idiot! Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah. Oh, you idiot. That was good. That was good. That's right.
I haven't seen that in
a billion years.
10, 15 years?
Longer than that.
It's coming
We're
back,
older than you think, my friend. Or as it says on the sundial, it's later than you think. Well, we really had a lot we wanted to pack into this episode.
The Legend of DB Cooper. What actually happened, the crime itself, that's like a quarter of the whole tale, the crime itself. Maybe it's a fifth of the whole story. And then the rest of it, the 3/4 or the 4/5.
Here we go.
Stay with me here.
Okay.
Look, all the rest of this is the investigation, the speculation, the amateur sleuthing, and myths of popular culture and public imagination that came after it. That's all after the actual incident.
Right.
And that's what we're looking at here. So we initially thought like, okay, we got a lot to say. Let's stamp off this part 1 here with really just
The crime.
The crime itself.
Yeah.
A little bit of leading into the investigation to set that up so you kind of know what's coming. But the incident itself, as I said in part one, not a whole lot went on. It kind of went off without a hitch. It's not like he had a 3-day hostage situation. It was pretty cut and dry because I think he took some people by surprise and he had it planned out enough that it did seem to go off without too much difficulty. He did luck out in a few places here and there. Nobody looked into his attaché case before he got on, which that all changed, folks, after this one.
Yeah.
Let me tell you, that's a few things changed
A lot of stuff.
about air travel after this. That was certainly one of them. They're going to look in every bag now. But this whole mythos, the investigation, all the amateur sleuthing blogs and the people who are looking into it, and it's still going on today, that is sparked by a relatively small incident, if you think about it. It triggered something in people's imagination, and in a way, maybe like a Robin Hood, but then again, he wasn't giving any of that to the poor, even if he had successfully lived through it. So it's not really like a Robin Hood thing, but that doesn't matter to a lot of people. The fact that he got away with it, I think, captures people's imaginations.
Yeah, and I think the Robin Hood thing got a little perverted in the sense that at that point, it was just about sticking it to the man, like sticking it to the corporation, getting away with it. Whether or not they got to share in it, the fact is the big company lost it and the guy took it and he got away with it, you know?
Yeah, people have loved that since, the Outlaws of the Dust Bowl, Dillinger, Bonnie and Clyde. There's something about that because, one, it's exciting. People love true crime and they like to see occasionally, as long as they're not hurting too many people, for people to get away with it every once in a while. That's why car chases, people are glued to the TV sets. Well, this episode is a little like our own version of the Mandela effect, because several listeners have already chimed in thinking that we've already done this topic.
Yeah, I saw that. It was all over social media. People were like, I could have sworn you covered this. But you know what, though? Here's the thing. Just type in DB Cooper into Apple Podcasts or whatever, and you'll see there are multitudes, and that's part of the reason this episode has got a lot of information in it. There's a ton of podcasts. There's podcasts completely dedicated to it, which we'll talk about this evening. And then there's some where it's just an episode, like Generation Y, our friends over there, they did the episode on it. There's a lot of people have been talking about it for a long time because it is, after all, an astonishing legend. But
it's also the system that beats the system.
Remember
the old AT&T, Pacific Bell, one of those, the big phone companies. That's what the guy was referencing in a follow-up note that you will get to much later.
Yes. Just to bring people back up to speed here on where we're at, we have a little bit of a timeline of events. This is, Tess did a full timeline for us, which she does for every episode. It's awesome in the research core in our posting group there. But we wanted to take just the first part of it here just to remind everyone where we're at and put a little bit of perspective on everything. And thanks, Tess, for putting this together. So, first date, February 21st, 1931. The occurrence of the first acknowledged skyjacking in the world. Some Peruvian rebels demanded the pilot of a Ford tri-motor craft fly over Lima so they could drop political leaflets. That was the first skyjacking.
I mean, it's littering, but it didn't seem that bad. I thought it was the first time that the friend of the Wright brothers, the neighbor, comes over. It's like, hey, let me scoot over. Let me get on. Let me get on that thing.
Yeah, that's it. I'm taking it.
No, it's one or two people. That's it. Get off this thing.
It's not going to fly. 30 years later, we had America's first act of air piracy. And Tulio Ramirez Ortiz holds a knife to a pilot's throat and points a gun at the co-pilot of a national airlines flight en route to Key West and demands to go to Cuba. Ortiz is arrested 14 years later in Miami trying to re-enter the U.S. Took him that long to get back, I guess. And here's the thing. That was 1961, but through the 60s and 70s, that was what was happening with most hijackings. It was people trying to get planes to take them to Cuba. That was the big deal. I remember that as a kid. I mean, I was very young, but vaguely I remember, another plane. It was just one of the things, like a plane was hijacked tonight and, flew to Havana or whatever. So that was what was going on at the time. Again, this was a time when you could walk into an airport with cash, give them a fake name, and get on a plane without anyone even looking in your bag.
Are you going to talk about the Alan Funt incident?
We could mention that. I think I have an open tab. I have 15 browsers, each one with 35 tabs open. I know he's in there somewhere.
We can do it later, but it's very interesting and kind of funny.
But first, because this was before that, in 1965, This is interesting. Tessa, I don't know how she figured this out, but I guess it's because there's a lot out there about DB Cooper and aviation nerds. Northwest Orient Airlines purchases the Boeing 727 that DB Cooper would later hijack. And here's an interesting thing. I was like, is Northwest and Northwest Orient, is this the same thing? Well, it turns out it is. It was called Northwest Orient for a couple of years because they were one of the first airlines to develop a travel corridor to Asia. And here's another fascinating thing. Since aircraft couldn't make the straight trip, it was too far, they would stop in the Aleutian Islands at Shemya. I'm not sure I'm saying that right, but I think
that sounds about right.
Yeah, Shemya, Shemya, and refuel so they could make it all the way across the Pacific. Shemya is one of the westernmost islands in the chain of the Aleutian Islands. They're part of Alaska, which Sarah Palin can see from her backyard. And by the way, if you Google pictures of that place, it is amazing. You can still see the rusted old hangars and stuff that people that were stationed there worked in. The U.S. Army had a base there, and then Northwest had a refueling place there.
Yeah, there was a battle there with the Japanese.
Oh, in Shemya? I didn't even find
in the Aleutians. Yeah,
right.
It was a bad one. But I had a friend of mine, I know that because he went and shot a documentary there.
Oh, cool.
On Kiska Island.
Okay.
And there's a large fin that is a radar, military radar installation that supposedly looks over the horizon.
Oh,
a specific tiny little northern part of a peninsula country.
Okay. Well, there you go.
Okay.
Well, I guess Shemya was, it's pretty remote. It does look beautiful in the pictures, but all the people that were stationed there called it the Rock. And surprisingly, one of our suspects was stationed in Shemya for almost 4 years. This is at a time when most people that went there only stayed a year and got the heck out. So, the next date in the timeline here is 1971, but let's take a little bit of a tangent, something that Forrest alluded to a few minutes ago. It turns out in February of 1969, a gentleman named Alan Funt was flying with his wife and his 2 youngest children on Eastern Airlines Flight 7, which they boarded in Newark, headed to Miami. However, that plane did not get to Miami because a couple of guys hijacked it and demanded, as we were talking about a few minutes ago, passage to Cuba. But here's the thing about Alan Funt. A lot of our younger listeners probably not going to know who he was. He hosted a show called Candid Camera, which was a huge CBS, very popular show, and it was all about practical jokes. This was the original Punk'd. Some of you are probably too young to even remember Punk'd with Ashton Kutcher.
Oh, dear.
But it was the original hidden camera prank show.
Hidden camera show,
Yeah, I mean, everyone is doing this now. You see it all the time. And I mean, Candid Camera had some really funny ones. One of my favorite ones was when they built a car. I think it was a Volkswagen Bug. I can't remember, but it was split down the middle and it drives up to a person at a gas station who's standing there. And then it looks like it's about to hit them and they're freaking out. And then it just splits in half and goes around them and reconnects. I mean, it's corny, but it was pretty funny to watch. There was a lot of really funny stuff. But the point is, Funt was the face of this. Everyone knew him. It's like David Letterman was late night talk guy. Alan Funt was like, there's a practical joke going on somewhere and you're a part of it. And because he was on this plane, a bunch of the people on the plane were like, come on, this is not a hijacking. This is where are the cameras?
They recognized Alan Funt.
They
was
saw
on
him.
there.
Yeah, they saw he was on the flight. They were all like, come on, we're not going to Cuba. And they wound up landing in Havana. So
yeah, but imagine what the hijackers thought. Like, what? No, this is really happening.
No, take us seriously.
We spent 30 minutes planning this. Come on.
According to this one blog that I'm reading about this, it's dangerousminds.net. We'll have a link to it. There were 93 people on the flight, and it was the 12th hijacking of just 1969. The 12th one. And that was February. That tells you how much hijacking was going on back then.
It was a very popular sport.
Well, and one of the things that I had read was like, rather than implementing security at airports, the idea that they were having, because most of these were to go to Cuba, was they were going to build a fake airport in far southern Florida to try to trick people to think that they were landing in Havana. So the idea was the pilots would pretend to go to Havana, then land at the fake Havana, and then everybody would get arrested, I guess. But then instead they decided, oh, maybe we should try security measures. So anyway, that's the Alan Funt story. Let's go back to our timeline. November 24th, 1971. This is when we get to our story. A man identifying himself as Dan Cooper purchased a plane ticket from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Washington. This is a 30-minute flight for $18.52 plus $1.48 in tax. It was a one-way ticket. He was asked if he was returning, and apparently he said, no, I will not be returning. He paid with a $20 bill. Now, this was a time when you didn't have to show ID or have your baggage x-rayed to get on a plane. Honestly, I feel like you could just run up towards the plane and throw some money on the ground and run up the stairs, and they would be like, fine. Anyway, shortly after the plane took off, Mr. Cooper, if that was his real name, took control of it. It was only 30 minutes to Seattle, but he made his plans known that he wanted to offload people, get $200,000 in ransom, refuel, and take off again. And when a flight attendant asked him if he had a grudge against the airline, he famously, supposedly said, "I don't have a grudge against your airline, miss. I just have a grudge." That's my Clint Eastwood.
Really?
Wasn't great. Yes, but he did say that. Or he's quoted as having said that. And what's interesting about this is we did find one website that I'm going to be talking about later. I love it. It's got handwritten notes from one of the crew members. They're not sure who it was, but it's all in the same handwriting. Probably one of the two flight attendants, probably Tina Mucklow or Florence Schaffner, about everything that was happening, like shorthand notes. And she wrote down some of the stuff that was said. The aircraft departed at 7:36 p.m. on the same day, of course, from Seattle under the control of Cooper. After rendezvousing with the stuff that he wanted, 4 parachutes and money, which he wanted in a knapsack, but it wasn't delivered in one. We can talk about that later, which made him mad. Knapsacks, by the way, were harder to come by back then, so that's the explanation there. But they probably also wanted to thwart his ability to just throw it on his back and do whatever he wanted with it, including jump out the plane. So as soon as the plane took off, he told flight attendant Tina Mucklow to join the rest of the flight crew, that was all the people that remained on the plane, in the cockpit. She was also the one that retrieved the money for him at the bottom of the stairs while they were in Seattle. At 8 p.m., a cockpit light indicated that the aft staircase of the plane was being manually lowered from the inside. At 8:13, about 13 minutes later, the plane's nose dipped.
Excellent calculation, sir. Yeah.
And the crew felt what they described as a pressure bump, which is kind of like when you roll one window down in your car and it makes your ears go crazy or whatever, followed by a corrective adjustment in the tail. I'm taking those exact words from one of the books we'll reference tonight called The Last Master Outlaw by Thomas J. Colbert and Tom Zalosi. You think he's Colbert or Colbert? I've been wondering that all through the research.
I think he's not that fancy.
Yeah, I think he's Colbert.
He just Colbert.
Anyway, that's just bringing you back up to speed on the idea of where we're at before we get back into this mystery and the investigation. And
I see here, and Scott has in the outline the rest of the timeline here, but it's grayed out because apparently we're going to talk about all this stuff. But you know what? Really, he could just read the rest of this and we could be done. We can get
Which that's it.
Just
I can go to bed.
Read the rest
well, this is the stuff that happened after some of this stuff. I thought we'd come to that later.
Okay.
Now is the perfect time to sign up for the Great Courses Plus.
Right you are, Scotty, because today our listeners can check out any course or lecture for free. Yep, that's free access to their entire library. You just sign up at thegreatcoursesplus.com/legends. If you're anything like Scott and I, you're curious about the many unknown facets of the world we live in, past, present, future, and beyond.
On that note, anyone who enjoys our show should take this opportunity to check out the series called The Real History of Secret Societies. It's a captivating analysis of secret organizations such as the Knights Templar, of course, but then it explores the Bolsheviks, the IRA, Japan's Black and Green Dragons. I mean, the list goes on and on. I didn't know about many of these organizations before I watched this course, you know?
Yeah, we've certainly heard about a lot of these organizations, but we didn't know a whole lot until we got into this course. And some of these lectures you and I have watched before, because it does a really good job of sifting through the lies and the legends and offers hard evidence of the consequences that many of these organizations, both real and imagined, have had on our society. Very good suggestion, Scott. Also, I'm thinking that our fans might enjoy the course Death, Dying, and the Afterlife, which takes a comprehensive look at...
Yeah, wait, don't tell me. Let me guess. Death, Dying, and the Afterlife.
Exactly. Well, we've covered that one before, too. But enough said, right? Well, actually, there are so many angles about this subject that I hadn't really considered, such as defining the experience of death itself. Asking the simple question, what is death after all? And of course, this all reminded me of our show with Rich Hannum on the topic, so I found it to be especially uplifting and empowering and very apropos.
Well, from history to hobbies, science to science fiction, there's so much to discover at the Great Courses Plus. Forrest and I love it, you're going to love it, and your kids will love it too. And remember, if you use our special URL, you will experience the Great Courses Plus for free.
Experience this informative and enthralling streaming service for yourself. Start your free trial today at thegreatcoursesplus.com/legends.
That's thegreatcoursesplus.com/legends. Candid.com/legends.
Hello everyone, I'm James Copper, and this is Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
Well, should we pick up with the investigation continuing?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Let's go back to what's happening now that he's jumped out of the plane.
Well, there's a few things to consider here because, as we said, as soon as he jumped out, that was the end of him. Maybe literally, but certainly the end of everything that we knew about him to that point. And what I mean by that is that there was a few pieces of evidence, and there were a lot of unknown factors. So the FBI and local police authorities had a lot of difficulty in calculating where Cooper may have landed. The estimated search area would be based on an equation with many precisely unknown variables throughout the flight path, constantly changing things like wind direction and speed, the weather. There was a heavy rainfall falling over the area of the Lewis River when Cooper jumped, but exact weather conditions would vary depending on your altitude and horizontal location.
And on top of that, this predates GPS. There wasn't just a little thing you can look down and it told you exactly where you were. That was not happening either for the aircraft or for Cooper when he jumped or landed.
FBI detectives recreated Cooper's escape using the same 727 jet and with Captain William Scott flying the same pattern. But what the agents did is they fastened a 200-pound, or they put 200 pounds of weight on a sled, and then they pushed it out the aft air stair opening, and they got the jet to kick up its tail in the same way as experienced by the flight crew when they were in the cockpit. So then they noted that, okay, it's probably at 8:13 p.m. during the skyjacking. That's when they experienced that tail kick up there, and they had to adjust the trim, as you said.
Yeah, and by the way, I found some actual pictures on a site we'll talk about later of the sled, like going out. Like they have pictures of that whole. Yeah, it's amazing. This one website was just a treasure trove of stuff like that. But the other thing that's interesting about that is when they pushed that sled out, the crew on that plane, when the sled went out, they didn't feel the pressure bump that the crew described when Cooper jumped, which is interesting. I don't know why, but just another little aside there.
It's a good point you bring up here because as much as you can try and recreate something, it's not going to be exactly the same. And you'll know what I'm talking about here in a minute.
Right. Another thing that I learned today was that the rear stairs came down with gravity, and because of the wind resistance, they don't think they came all the way down, but they came down enough that they could walk on them. They sent those two guys walked down to the end of it, but they weren't quite in stair formation. It was more like a pointy gangplank.
But that's another interesting observation because, as we said in part one, and I wondered about this, it was around 8 p.m., sometime around then, when the crew, they got the warning light coming on in the cockpit that the door had opened, but the actual tail kick up did not happen until 8:13.
Right, which means they surmised he was standing there staring out into the dark, into the clouds and the rain and the wind, trying to figure out when the hell to get out of the plane.
And I've gone this far, might as well jump.
And also maybe wetting his pants. I don't know. It's like, I mean, that's got to be the moment when you're just like, am I really doing this?
Yeah, you really feel alive, I'll bet. You're just really invigorated. That brisk, cold, wet, Western Washington, drizzly 40 degrees on the ground, that kind of, and you're just, it's just hitting you in the face, and I'll bet he just really felt alive at that point. Maybe more so after he actually jumped, but that's got to be a moment, folks. And you know what? Some people wonder, is that why he did it?
Yeah.
Is the reason for him going through this not so much the money, but just to see if he could get away with it? Anyway, we'll get to that later. But yes, 8:13 was deduced as the most likely time for Cooper actually jumping. Another determining factor for Cooper's actual landing zone would be how long before he pulled the ripcord. That freefall time plus wind could significantly steer him and throw off the extrapolation estimates. You see what I'm getting at here? This is a big equation. There's a lot of different factors going on, which changes the outcome here.
Entropy. This is like the physics class I accidentally signed up for at NC State University. It was calculus-based physics. And it was, up until then, you took physics, you threw the rock. All you had to know was how much the rock weighed, how far you were throwing it. But in this class, you had to know what the wind was doing, what specific gravity of the earth at this point, blah, blah. Yeah. You just put all that stuff into the mix. And then on top of that, the other thing to remember is that the chute that he took was a fast open, non-controllable chute. It wasn't like the modern chutes you see where you can pull the cords and pick where you're going. It's a circle, and it goes where God wants it to go.
There you go. Well, hey, you know what? Some investigators believe He may have not have pulled the ripcord at all. And then, well, where's his body? Where did that fall? Where's that money? Retrieving the money, again, that's a lot of money. They want to retrieve that if they can. And of course, catch him if he lands and gets away with it and lives through it.
Remember that I said earlier that he requested a knapsack. He wanted a backpack or something for the money, and they didn't bring that. They brought this like bag thing, so he didn't have a way to carry the money. One of the things that was thwarted about his plan was how to get the money off the plane with him. And that goes back to what we talked about in part 1 about when Tina, shortly before she closed the curtain between first class and coach to go up to the cockpit, she looked back and saw him tying cords on. He was trying to strap or tie the money in a way that he could take it down. And there was some theory that he may have tried to open one of the other parachutes, take it out, because I think that it was left behind on the aircraft.
Yes, don't get ahead of yourself. We're going to get to that. It's all...
But he was putting the money in there. He's putting the money in that bag. Yeah.
He's put it into something other than his socks.
Yes.
Well, listen, remember the Air Force pilots? Here's another fact. It's like all these little things that we mentioned in part 1. That's why I kind of wanted to stress, and if I were a listener, well, if I were a listener, I wouldn't be listening to this show, certainly. But if I were, then the idea, though, is that all these little things that we covered, and even here at the beginning of this part 2, these things will be questioned and they'll be factored in later for an estimate and an idea and an extrapolation. And of course, another crackpot theory, possibly, or a good theory. We don't know yet. But this part here where the military pilots, the Air Force pilots, did not see anything open up.
Right.
Was that because he didn't open the chute? Now, granted, it would be very hard for them to see anything in those conditions at night with cloud cover below them. Cooper, a black dress speck jumping out of the plane. So again, one determining factor is when did he pull that ripcord?
Do you have something about the radar at McCord coming up?
No, there's something that you can remember to say that. Yeah.
Okay, yes. I'm going to say that I read today that the radar systems at McCord Base, which was close by, would have been able to see him jumping out of the plane.
They would have on radar.
Yeah, I read that today. I mean, I don't know if it's true, but...
Say that again.
The radar would have picked him up at the Air Force Base.
Okay, at the Air Force Base, but not with the, I don't believe the fighter pilots picked it up on their planes.
I didn't see anything about that. And like you said, I haven't seen anything that suggested that any pilot saw it jump, but they're saying that it might have had a radar signature with the radars that they had at the base.
Well, there you go. That's another factor. Maybe he didn't pull the ripcord at all.
There wasn't an implication about whether or not it would have picked him up, whether his chute was open or not. Like, I think it might have been because it's a projectile. I'm sure someone will email us, but like, it could be an incoming weapon. So I don't know what the sensitivity was in 1971 of the base's radars, but it depends. Seems to be a suggestion that it might have picked him up, whether his chute was open or not.
As far as I know, it depends also on the material. It's like the Wobblin' Goblin, the F-117. Because of the shape, it's like it doesn't disappear completely, but it shows up the size of a goose on radar.
Right.
And so that throws people off. Anyway, getting back to this, look, considering all the factors involved, investigators concluded at first that Cooper most likely landed in an area somewhere between Cowlitz County to the north and Clark County to the south, in southwestern Washington state, southwest of Mount St. Helens. Bigfoot country.
Yes.
Bigfoot country. More specifically, a few miles southeast of the very small town of Ariel, and south of the Lewis River and its dammed up Lake Merwin. Since 1974, the Ariel General Store and Tavern has hosted an annual Cooper Day celebration, except not in 2015 because sadly the owner died then.
Oh,
but, it's an ongoing thing.
Maybe not this year.
Oh, probably not. Yeah.
Everything's
we're not
canceled.
doing their t-shirt.
2020 is canceled. No, but it sounds like a blast. I would love to go to this thing, actually.
Just remember Bigfoot. It's going to come up later.
Yes.
Okay, so this area today, though, it's not as heavily wooded, doesn't seem to be from the satellite photos, as it was just north of the Lewis River back then. More land is cleared. It changes a lot. We saw that with the Bet Sphere, how things and development can really change the landscape here. But back then, probably a little more wooded, a little more dense. It still is now, if you look at the satellite photos. And back then, as it is now, there were handfuls of farms around this area. I would guess probably fewer back then as well. Don't know. I didn't check. I'm just making an observation here. But the idea is, if he's going to land, you're going to have to look for an open patch of land, like a farm.
Yeah.
You don't want to do it in a thicket of 70 and 80 and 90 foot evergreens.
No.
Okay.
Good way to break limbs.
All kinds of limbs. But certainly it was probably a lot more dense in 1971. Well, boats searched the river and lake. FBI and local sheriff's deputies searched on foot. They went door to door. They used helicopters and planes. They patrolled overhead, and nothing of Cooper was found at the time.
Do you think that means he died and they never found his body, or he survived and that's why there's no trace? When I hear that they did that massive search and they didn't find anything,
Yeah.
my inclination is to think that he survived the jump. Because I feel like the odds of jumping to your death and escaping that kind of manhunt with your chute tangled up and ropes everywhere and hunters running around. I mean, I know it's a lot of land that nobody's ever on, but but considering the search, the aerial search and everything else, and all the calculations they did, it's my understanding that initially they were in the wrong area. They adjusted the search area by 17 miles later.
No, that's the whole point of this.
You would think it's sooner or later. I mean, even decades later, somebody would be like, "Oh, look, a parachute. Oh, a skull."
No, you should know better than that, because there's actually a sad little side story that we'll get to that will illustrate my point.
Okay.
How, yes, you can't scour every inch of everything. Now, this is quite an effort, and I think maybe one of the largest, if not the largest, and most intensive manhunt in U.S. history, certainly. But even then, as we'll see, some things get missed, and we know this because of what was found later, all right? Now, at the time, the Army National Guard out of Oregon also worked with the FBI in conducting aerial searches. The whole flight path, they searched everything from Seattle down to Reno, Nevada, and found nothing. And that's from the sky. If they didn't find any trace of him, well, he wasn't carrying much with him. It's not like he had those leaflets those guys wanted to drop, and they're all over the place, and those can be tracked. If he didn't pull the chute, then he is basically a human-sized black lump in the middle of a very dense forest, maybe hung up in a tree.
If he didn't pull the chute, yeah.
Again, that's the point, is that there are so many variables here. It would be so hard to track anyway. Nowadays, a little easier. If they went right away and there was no cloud cover, they might be able to pick him up on thermal cameras, dead or alive, or at least for a little bit until his body cooled off. Unless he planned ahead, and I know that the military has dark clad clothing that is supposed to trap in your body heat, so you're not picked up on thermal cams. And
they have thermal back then? 71?
Good question. I don't know. They certainly didn't seem to have it then doing this search.
Yeah, and I don't think he would have planned for that necessarily.
There are things that he didn't care about because it was 1971 or could even think of, like the DNA, okay?
Yeah.
He may have just taught all that other stuff he left on the plane. He could have just easily tossed out with him and left nothing. But at one point here, in March and April in the spring of 1972, the FBI conducted a ground search with military personnel from the Air Force, National Guard, civilians, and about 200 Army soldiers. This went on in total for about 36 days, and they found nothing directly significant to Cooper. However, to your point, Scott, they may have been looking in the wrong place.
Yeah.
Later corrected calculations placed Cooper's actual landing zone closer to the Washougal River, some 25 to 30 miles southeast of the originally suspected area, and also possibly closer to the Columbia River. And there were other updated calculations involved, but two major ones were that Captain William Scott had reconsidered his flying path estimates. Captain Smith was ordered to fly low and slow by Cooper, which means he had to take control manually. And later, he estimated that originally he'd been flying much further east than he first thought. And the other consideration is that Tom Bohan, a Continental Airlines pilot, thought that the wind direction factored into the initial estimate could be off by as much as 80 degrees. And he figured this since he was flying behind Flight 305 by only about 4 minutes during the hijacking.
Yeah, and just again, reminding people, it was pre-GPS. The technique that airplanes used to navigate back then was called VOR, which stands for VHF Omni Range. And that consists of three components for that. There's a station on the ground, and those are spaced out that transmit radio signals that radiate out from like in a clock pattern. And then an antenna on the aircraft, which receives the signal, and then an instrument in the aircraft that interprets the signal. And those are at certain frequencies. So that's how they navigated everywhere, and that's why it's less precise. So when you hear Captain Scott go, no, I'm not sure I was here or there, that's because this was way less precise than GPS and relied a lot more on the navigation skills of the pilots and co-pilots.
Yes.
So, of course, one of the first things they're doing, aside from looking for Cooper, is they're also looking for the money. That should be easier to follow, right? Because whoever's got the money, whether it's Cooper or if he was a meat waffle, as I said in part one, maybe somebody finds the money and they spend it. Well, here's the story that is most frequently associated with how the money was rounded up and how it was presented. And this is what you hear the most about this case. The FBI gathered the money up for his ransom on the night of the 24th of November, and they gathered it from several banks in Seattle. And he had requested, according to the popular lore, $200,000 in unmarked $20 bills. Of course, you have a note here that it may have been without sequential serial numbers. I'm not sure about that. I don't remember reading that anywhere.
I have a thought later on that we can discuss about that, but I'm not sure here. Yeah, that's why I made a note. Is that part of fictional lore from the movies and TV?
Right.
That's what everybody always asks for. Does it make a difference? Well, we'll talk about that later. Well, of course, what we know, he wanted $200,000. Did he ask for denominations? Did he ask for any numbers to be different? I think he probably may have said, don't make this obvious, don't mark them in any way, because he was thinking that way. He was savvy enough to think about that ahead of time.
Well, here's what's interesting about that. This is in direct contradiction to the most popular narrative about the money and how it was arranged and how it was provided. And I thought this was pretty fascinating. This comes from a website that is no longer up, which is one of
those are the best.
Yeah, it's one of the best websites on DB Cooper there is. And you see it referenced when you go into all the forums and you look at all the different websites that have information about DB Cooper. This was a website run by a gentleman who went simply by Sluggo. And
again, you can't doubt that.
Yes, and the address was the tail number of the plane. It was n467us.com. http://n467us.com. It's not there anymore. But again, courtesy of the Wayback Machine, which is an internet archive site, I was able to find snapshots of it going back several months. Unfortunately, the last full snapshot of it was about April of 2019. It looks like somewhere near there or the month after that, it went down for whatever reason. It had been up a long time. Maybe he just got tired of it. But when you find the archived version of it, it's great because the Wayback Machine archives, you can click all the links and drill down on them. And one of the pages has a great deal of information. It's got facts and myths about the case, and everything is cited and cross-corroborated with sources from where it came from. And this is what Sluggo's site says about the money. It was not rounded up by the FBI. It was provided by C First Bank, which is now Bank of America. I'm reading directly from this defunct website now. The money had been earmarked for situations such as these and was always on hand. It had been photographed and serial numbers recorded by their security. So according to Sluggo's website, the FBI didn't do any of that. And I did read somewhere else that they used a machine called a Recordac, which was had to do with, I think that was an Eastman Kodak Eastman product that was similar to what you would use to capture microfiche or microfilm back in the old days. So the reality is the money was standing by for hostage and ransom situations. It was just there. The bank had it for that. And when they talk about it having been recorded, it was probably recorded a long time ahead of time. They put it together and recorded the serial numbers, and they put it in a vault just in case something came up. A bank manager got held hostage or whatever. So that's where the money came from.
Yeah, I thought about, actually, again, from our audiovisual backgrounds and film and still photography backgrounds in the old days of film, I wondered,
you can't photograph that much money fast. Yeah, there's no way. Not back
because
then.
There's 10,000 bills. Yeah. So either you have to do it right then, and there is a machine that does that, which is possible that it would go through, but it's got to take a snapshot of each one. That's also 10,000 pictures.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But I'll tell you later on that maybe the FBI or whoever photographed those, C First Bank, didn't get all the serial numbers recorded.
That's right. Well, according to Sluggo's site, the money was transported by C First Bank security to a Seattle police detective who then drove it to the airport and handed it over to Northwest Airlines. The money was bundled in various counts so that no bundle was the same. Each bundle was secured by rubber band and different counts so that it appeared the money was hastily gathered. This was an illusion.
That's interesting. Okay, so you're saying here, now this will come up later as important to the discovery of the money. You're saying these rubber banded bundles.
Rubber baby buggy bumpers.
Rubber baby buggy bumper banded bumbles.
Say that 3 times fast.
They are all of different counts.
Yes.
They are not 100 bill stacks of 20s.
According to Sluggo's website, they are put together that way to look as though they've been hastily gathered. Now think about this. This makes sense. If you've set this aside for ransom money for a potentially bad situation, and you're trying to predict ahead of time what somebody might ask for. And one of the things that people might ask for is, like you said, non-sequential serial numbers, or, get this money together now. And if you don't want them to think that it can be easily traced, you might not want to present them with neatly, perfectly bundled, sequential looking serial numbers.
Right.
Everything bundled up the same way. So it might be just to convince whoever's getting the money that it's safe to spend because it was hastily gathered.
I guess if you're of that kind of not so smart criminal, I could see that happening. I mean, the other question is, did he specify denomination, or that they just figured like, well, they're not going to want big bills like hundreds. You have to break those. I mean, I have trouble breaking those now at small places. So 20s are much easier to spend. Is that what somebody's going to want to ask for?
Well, according again to Sluggo's website, Cooper never specified the denomination. So to that end, there's two things about that are interesting to me. And by the way, everything I'm citing from Sluggo's website is connected back to sources that it was gathered from. I'm not going into all those sources here, but we'll have the links to the Wayback Machine's version of his website where you can check all that stuff out. But according to him, they didn't specify, and I'm pretty sure this was taken directly from one of the flight attendants' handwritten notes, which are all up there. And there's a transcript of those in case you can't read them. And we have that. I downloaded that. We'll put that up with the show notes where you can actually read the notes that were taken by the flight attendants during the whole ordeal. Apparently, he had just said, look, I want $200,000 in a knapsack. In one way, this kind of says maybe he didn't plan every little detail, because there's a huge difference in weight between 200,000 in 20s or 200,000 in 10s, or whatever else. Smaller the bill, the more the weight, or 200,000 in hundreds, like you said, Forrest. But had he gone with hundreds, he would have only had 5 pounds of money to deal with rather than 25. But as we said in part one, that weight isn't really a big deal to jump with if you've got a knapsack like he requested, but he didn't get a knapsack, which seemed like an intentional thwarting of what he wanted. So,
well, answer me about this bit of factoid here. It's often reported that as they recorded the serial number of each bill, they did manage to give Cooper serial numbers that started with the letter L, and that indicates that they were issued from the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco. And most of the bills were either of the date, the 1963A or 1969 issuance series date. Is that true?
I think that's true. I haven't seen a whole lot to go against that, but you know what? For our listeners that are interested in more information on this, I do want to recommend a podcast. It's called The Cooper Vortex, and this is a show by Darren Schaefer and Russell Colbert. I don't know if there's any relations there, but it's been around since 2018. It's got, I don't even know, 30 episodes or more. It is a deep dive. It's all about Cooper, and in fact, their most recent episode that I'm seeing on Apple Podcasts, posted on September 6th, is called DB Cooper's Money with Arthur L. Friedberg. Mr. Friedberg is a professional numismatist. I can never say this right. Numismatist. There you go.
There we go.
Mr. Friedberg is a professional numismatist. Thank you, Forrest, for correcting me on that, and Sarah, hopefully, for cutting out how many times I said it wrong. He's been doing this for 40 years. He has a BA in history from George Washington University and an MBA from NYU. And his family firm, the Coin and Currency Institute, is a founding member of the Elite International Association of Professional Newsmen. What was it, Forrest?
Never mind.
I know the word, but I just, yes.
Okay.
Anyway.
I trust you.
He talks about money. He knows about money.
People who like coins.
What I can say is I was checking this podcast out earlier today, and I heard him specifically talking about the denominations of the bills and how many of them were actually produced. One of the other things that was interesting that I heard him say was that they had a lifespan of about 8 years, I think. And generally that's when they started to deteriorate, and you wouldn't at this point find a lot more in circulation. But anyway, you can obviously go there, the Cooper Vortex, check that out, and you can drill down on pretty much anything that we're talking about and a whole lot more that we didn't even touch on. But one of the things that's, that he talks about is whether or not they match those denominations. I didn't find anything that goes against what you were just talking about.
Okay, then. And why all this talk about numismatisms?
You're having problems too.
And magic. No, I'm just making fun of you. Why all this talk about the money? Well, we'll see here why the money is important and keeping track of the serial numbers. Well, the FBI, however they were recorded, took the list of serial numbers and they delivered that to any place Cooper or anyone who stole a bunch of money may have tried to pass them. This took place about a month after his escape. Places like banks and other financial institutions, gambling establishments, of course, you're going to want to put that all on red, right?
Yeah.
Probably not. 50-50, though, that might be exciting. That's also, I know that sounds like a joke, but some people think maybe he didn't care about the money. Anyway, pretty much any place that handled large amounts of cash. And then they sent this list of serial numbers to law enforcement across the globe. Maybe he's going to want to take off to sunny Europe or someplace far away in a tropical location. They don't know. They had no idea how far he could have gotten if he's not picked up soon. So at that point, John N. Mitchell, the U.S. Attorney General at the time, made the serial numbers public early the next year, 1972. So now those numbers are all out. So as you can see the investigation going, they probably want to keep that secret in case they pop up. They're reported by a bank. Now it's like, well, nothing's really popping up. So let's just make this public. Let's have everybody check their bills. Maybe he's passing them person to person. You don't know. The airline now, Northwest Orient, offered to pay a reward of 15% of any recovered ransom money up to a maximum of $25,000. But by 1975, when none of the authentic bills had turned up yet, Global Indemnity, Northwest Orient's insurance company, paid out their $180,000 on the loss claim. So they finally had to cough that money up. Again, back then, significant amount, but nothing's jiving. No ransom money's popping up anywhere here. The Oregon Journal newspaper offered a reward of $1,000 to the first person to turn in a $20 bill with a matching serial number to them or the FBI. And they also reprinted the list of numbers. The Seattle Post-Intelligencer offered $5,000. Several bills with serial numbers that were close, but not an exact match, were turned in. So by late November of 1974, the rewards were rescinded. Close but no cigar.
And according to the research I found, and in more than one place, I saw sources say that no one thought that the banks were even looking after about 6 months. It just was too much work, and they didn't care anymore, and got to get on with life.
Yeah, it's not really that computerized back then.
Right.
Okay? Nothing's scanning these things like a robot. This is people looking at bills. However, that did work later at another famous ransom case.
Mm-hmm.
But for now, nothing is being found. But then, on February 10th, 1980, some of the ransom money was found. Brian Ingram, who was 8 years old at the time, was camping with his family on a stretch of beach on the Columbia River known as Tina or Tina Bar, like a sandbar. And I said Tina twice because it's often spelled T-E-N-A or T-I-N-A, like the common name. This spot is downstream from Vancouver, Washington, about 9 miles and about 20 miles southwest of the town of Ariel. What Brian found were 2 packs with $100 $20 bills each, and a third packet consisting of 90 $20 bills, still bound with rubber bands, which was the same configuration handed to Cooper. $5,800 total. And you can see the photos of this money posted everywhere online. We actually even have it in our own photo galleries for the web pages for these episodes. And the money is greatly deteriorated, but the FBI was able to positively ID the bills as part of the ransom money package. Pretty exciting, huh?
Yeah.
When Best Fiends declares that the fun never ends, well, that's really no exaggeration, dear friends here. There are literally 5,000 levels and counting. So if you were somehow worried that you're going to get to level 3,247 and just run out of fun, don't be. It's not going to happen. There's always another update. So don't blame them if you end up, well, just a little bit obsessed.
Yeah, Forrest would know all about that.
Oh, no, come on there, buddy. Well, of course, as many of you know, Scott and I just have this friendly little competition going just to see. I always just like to tease him at what level he's at.
A competition. This is not a competition. Sure, we both play Best Fiends. We both enjoy Best Fiends, but I am under no illusion that I'm ever going to catch up to you. Just so you know, Forrest is the reason they keep adding levels.
No, come on now. No, that's not true. You'd be surprised. There are people that just blow me away, like how far they are. They're just really good at it, and I'm like stuck doing the same one.
I've not met said people. All I know is you, and I'm sure they're scrambling. The programmers are scrambling to add levels before you catch up to them.
There's the minutiae news, and then there's a leaderboard. It's all in the app. You could see what people are doing by country. It's kind of crazy. Anyway, come on. It's not the end goal here. It's the journey of having fun now, isn't it?
Well, I have to confess, last night I actually skipped my normal routine of flicking through TikToks and crazy Russian videos, and instead I pulled the covers over my head so the light from my phone didn't cause a hassle for my better half, and I made it through about, at least a couple hundred levels or more, and I had a blast doing it, of course. I had to kind of make myself put it away.
Okay, the 100 seems a little high, maybe 3 or 4 before your wife complained.
I might be exaggerating.
No, I get it, though. Once you get started, you blast through a couple of them.
I'm just trying to impress you.
You don't have to do that. Well, anyway, look, for any of you who haven't tried Best Fiends, I like to refer to it as the can't put it down mobile puzzle game with over 100 million downloads and counting.
Nice job. Do you practice that?
Yeah, instead of rehearsing the show, or taking notes, that's what I did.
Seriously, once you download Best Fiends, boredom won't stand a chance. It's free to download, and it has literally millions of 5-star reviews on the Apple App Store and Google Play.
You can download Best Fiends free today on the Apple App Store or Google Play. That's friends without the R. Best Fiends.
So, Forrest, we have some exciting news to share with our listeners, don't we?
I do believe we do. May I do the honors?
Absolutement. That's my French. That's all the French I remember from high school.
Oh, we're going to get you to do more. Just trust me. Well, look, Scott and I are very excited that we're getting pretty close to a complete overhaul of our website, among other things that you'll be hearing about in a few weeks. Now, hold on. Don't panic. We just wanted to improve the navigation and experience of visiting our site for everyone because traffic has actually gotten to be pretty respectable.
Which is why we're always so enthusiastic about Squarespace as a sponsor. Honestly, since we've partnered with Squarespace, we've been very pleased with our website functionality, and especially just how stress-free and painless our weekly updates are. But by the same token, we're so busy with the show now, we wanted to get some assistance with the overhaul.
We've grown so much in the last 5 or 6 years, and what's great about Squarespace is that it grows with you. So we took advantage of Squarespace Circle and their designer marketplace. It's really great. We found a designer there who's been absolutely amazing to work with. She's incredibly proficient, fast, diligent. She's always thinking ahead in ways that we personally might not have the foresight to do.
Yeah, we wouldn't have. But getting back to my point, this is a great symbiotic relationship for us because we get to stay on Squarespace where we know it's going to be easy to maintain the site and add and change content while also having an expert who specializes in Squarespace design and can maximize all of its amazing features for us. All the gain and no pain.
I'm surprisingly okay with all that.
And that's really why our current overhaul is so trouble-free. Our designer knows her client, us in this case, will be able to easily manage a Squarespace site day to day, and she prides herself on being able to simply hand the keys back over when her work is done.
Yeah, she knows that all of us can trust Squarespace to keep it simple when it comes to running things. That said, we're 5 years in now running it ourselves, and if it weren't for Squarespace being so easy to operate and having award-winning customer support, we wouldn't have gotten this far. So for any of you small business owners or entrepreneurs out there considering a new website, you gotta check out Squarespace first. It truly is the best option.
Say more, sell more. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a meaningful online presence and run your business.
Check out squarespace.com/legends for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the offer code LEGENDS to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
That's squarespace.com/legends for your free trial. And again, when you're ready to launch, use the offer code LEGENDS to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
Forrest and Scott, thank you for supporting their sponsors. I'm Paula. Now back to the show.
Okay, so now we got this statement from Brian from the Tina Barr page of the DB Cooper forum website. That's got a lot of great stuff. You could tell it's a labor of love by some enthusiasts. Here, Brian Ingram describes finding this small portion of the ransom money. He apparently made these statements while at PCGS, which is a banknote and coin grading company. They're like a third-party authorization place. If you have some pristine or collectible bills and coins, they will verify them. So as I say here about banknote grading, PCGS is proud to launch PCGS Banknote as the premier third-party certification service for paper currency. And why don't you read what Brian had to say about him being 8 years old and finding something pretty cool on the beach?
I was 8 years old and on vacation.
He did not sound like that.
Oh, okay. I was 8 years old and on vacation with my parents on February 10th, 1980, when I found about $5,800 of the ransom money along the banks of the Columbia River near Vancouver, Washington. We were going to make a fire along the riverbank. I was on my hands and knees, smoothing out the sand with my right arm, and I uncovered 3 bundles of money just below the surface. My uncle thought we should throw it in the fire. Well, his family turned the money over to the FBI, and eventually the FBI returned 25 bills to them along with dozens of fragments that contained little or no trace of serial numbers. Most of the notes have lightly written initials of FBI agents who inventoried and examined the items soon after they were discovered by Ingram. And now, according to New York Magazine and People Magazine, in 1986, the FBI kept 14 bills as evidence and divided the remaining bills equally between Brian Ingram and Northwest Orient's insurance company, presumably Global Indemnity. Ingram made about $37,000 in 2008 when he sold 15 of his bills at an auction.
Wow.
That's pretty cool. That's a pretty good investment, right?
A lot better than the face value, yeah.
The FBI brought in the Portland State University geologist Dr. Leonard Palmer to analyze the sandbar where the money was found. And he found that between the 1971 hijacking and the 1980 money find, the Columbia River was dredged and sand had been deposited on Tina Bar in 1974. Palmer's report determined that the money was in a layer of top sand laid down by the dredging. This implied the money was perhaps somewhere else upstream for years before coming to rest on Tina Bar. Dr. Palmer found 4 different layers of earth in the area where the ransom money was found. An upper active layer of 6 to 8 inches of reworked beach sand, which contained the recovered money, along with some new soda pop cans and other non-rusted debris, not severely damaged, rusted, or aged. This is an upper active layer of sand recently laid down, which is currently being worked by the river and natural forces. Such layers are typically sterile, which helps explain the survival of the money in this layer. Then a post-dredging cross-bedded layer, a clay lump sand layer, and an older sand layer. This pre-dredging layer is uniform in texture and composition and is light in color, deposited prior to 1974.
Okay, interesting.
Palmer felt that at the height and in the layer found, the money was deposited probably within a year or so of discovery and more than 4 years after the dredging in 74. He added that he felt certain this was not a case of the money having worked its way up through the post-dredging sand to the upper active layer. He felt certain the upper active layer and the cross-bedded layer below were 2 distinct layers, and the money was confined to the upper active layer only. Palmer based this on 3 facts. 1, the money was rounded on its corners, which is caused by the flow of water and perhaps tumbling en route. 2, the money was remarkably well preserved. The upper active layer of sand on beaches is sterile, as we said a few minutes ago, and one of the best preservatives of any soil. Signs of rubber bands were still in place around the money, although they were badly deteriorated, and all that fits with preservation in an upper layer of sterile sand. Money would have lasted no more than a year in nature unless protected. And 3, the money was found only in the surface layer and none was found in the post-dredging sand below.
Well, that's a pretty interesting conclusion there. And again, that comes from the DB Cooper website forum. And what's interesting is that now we've got science looking into this and an actual geologist looking at this stuff, trying to determine how did this money get there, because we still don't really know. But this is what FBI agent Larry Carr had to say about the money find. But he was one of the principal investigators here on the case in the more modern era here. Quote, "There is nothing that points to the money arriving at its location by hand. If it did not get there by human hands, then it had to get there by natural means. From the condition and position of the found money, we know it had to have been protected and all together upon beaching at Tina's bar. That means the money stayed in the bag, which we then can conclude Cooper lost it upon jumping or landing or walking through the woods.
All due respect to Special Agent Carr,
Yes.
there's some assumptions being made here that I might have some questions about later on in this series.
Oh, dear. So there's another former agent in charge, and that was Ralph P. Himmelsbach from the Portland FBI field office, and also the author of a book that a lot of this information is taken from, Norjack, The Investigation of DB Cooper. You see the wiki entry, which is really thorough and helped us structure the shows. Also, a lot of sources you'll see around the internet is taken from his book because, yes, he was the special agent in charge at the time, and then he retired and wrote a book.
Yeah, and I will just say I have not read his book, and he passed away not too long ago, actually. But
Right.
And I haven't read his book. I did read a couple of books associated with this case. But one thing, I did see him interviewed in several pieces of media that we consumed ramping up to this. And this is, I just want to say, this is a no-nonsense guy. He's all about facts. He doesn't care about anything else that can't contribute to solving the case. He described one book that was a mix between nonfiction and fiction about one of the possible suspects as mostly filler. That's what he, because for him, it's like, I need to make direct connections. But the other thing that I thought was interesting about Himmelsbach is that he's also, and it may be of the time period that he was from, he's very much looking for a specific profile of a hardened criminal with a long legacy of activity, as opposed to what some people think, the other people look, and this is something that will come up again with me on the themes in terms of Cooper, the other idea of a civilian who snapped or a guy who just pulled this amazing one-off, a one-hit wonder. Himmelsbach did not seem to be on board with that at all. He's like, no, we're looking for X, Y, and Z. This is the kind of person we're looking for. So I just want to say, like, in terms of FBI, he was kind of old school. And not that there's anything wrong with that. I don't know which way's right or wrong. I'm not a cop, but like that's just his disposition, I'm saying.
I'm sorry, I should have this on a placard, but I always think of the line from The Usual Suspects, which we have a section for usual suspects down here. To a cop, there's no mystery to the street. If you think you find a dead guy and you think his brother did it, you'll find out you're right most of the time. So they can't rely on speculation. But for Himmelsbach, I would say, he's cut and dried, just like you said. He's going to look at just what shows up and analyze that. And as it said before in another source, that it's not a romantic idea with him. There's nobody riding off into the sunset with, at the time, $1.7 million.
No, and he frequently refers to this suspect, that Cooper, as, he doesn't like to see him romanticized at all. He refers to him as a common criminal or a thug or that's how he wants to see him, and he may very well be right.
Well, what his thinking was about the money find, the condition of the money cited. This comes from an excerpt from the New York Times from February 22nd, 1980. And the little passage from the clipping here says, the agent said that's talking about Himmelsbach, based on the tattered condition of the money, he felt morally certain, quote unquote, the money had been exposed ever since the hijacking, rather than having been buried by the hijacker, and added, this lends support to the conclusion. It doesn't prove it, that it was likely he didn't make it and he is lying somewhere near where he fell. Still, Mr. Himmelsbach acknowledged that only the discovery of a body that can be identified positively as that of Cooper, or conclusive evidence that he survived, will end the mystery. So, like you said, cut and dried. It's like, look, it doesn't prove it, doesn't not prove it, and we won't know till somebody finds his bones or finds a 90-year-old man, 90-plus-year-old man at this point, and can positively ID this person. But that's it. Well, what else, interestingly, was found at the same site and at the same layer were 2 soda cans. This goes back to the blog for DB. Palmer found 2 cans of Sioux City sarsaparilla soda at about the same depth as the money. According to Palmer, and that's the geologist, the cans were not in the sand long due to no damage from the elements. Palmer believes the cans got on the riverbanks not long after being found. That company, Sioux City sarsaparilla, I'm taking it, started this line in 1973, so it's afterwards. it's doubtful the cans were in the sand that long or rust would be visible on the cans. It's hard to say if they came in with the tides and settled close together, being the same brand. A third can was also found, but Palmer didn't say much about the can. This was a orange soda made by Nesbitt's. One could only speculate and believe that it's possible the cans were buried after drinking them, because this area was known for outdoor activity like fishing. So maybe somebody drank the sodas and just like, I'll just ditch these here.
There was a guy that fished there every day. Every day.
Ooh.
And everyone who ever went there at any time that was a local saw that guy there every day.
Right.
But more on that later.
Again, why go on and on and on about the money? Well, the reason is that the only other piece of evidence found that seems to be definitely connected to Cooper and discovered in the time period between 1978 and 2017, get this is a find. It's an instruction placard found in November 1978 by a deer hunter approximately 13 miles east of Castle Rock, Washington, next to a logging road. Castle Rock, it's about 30 miles northwest of the initial presumed landing zone area, just south of Ariel, Washington, and Lake Mervyn, and maybe 50 miles northwest of the updated estimated possible landing zone near the Washougal River drainage area.
That was Hunter Carroll Hicks who found that.
Yeah, well, still, Castle Rock, it's still basically in Flight 305's general flight path. And guess what the card was?
How to open the back stairs, right?
Yes.
Wasn't that what it was?
Printed on the placard were instructions for lowering the aft Airstairs on a 727.
He probably was reading them on the way down. He was
let me see that.
Next time.
Yeah.
According to the FBI, they estimated that where that was found was about 6 minutes of flying time from the point where Cooper had jumped out of the aircraft.
Wait a second. Okay, so he jumps out. Does he take the placard with him, or he snapped it off the wall?
Maybe the wind whipped it off the wall, and it just was, it would be, in that case, flotsam, not jetsam. Right? Because flotsam falls off, jetsam, you put it off on purpose. Like with boats anyway. I don't know if you call it that with airplanes, but if you put it off the boat on purpose, you jettisoned it, it's jetsam. If it falls off the boat while it's sinking or whatever, it's flotsam and it floats. Not necessarily floats. It actually doesn't really necessarily have to do with floating, but...
Well, okay.
We're really wowing people tonight.
Well, I'm amazed either of us are still awake at this point. But these are important because that's it, folks. You got tattered money and you got a placard from a plane. But that would be such a cool find. And when you come upon that, you might know the story, but somebody finds that, the hunter in the woods, the first thought going through your head, like, what the heck? 720? Oh my goodness. I wonder. And then you make a call to the FBI, I guess. Yeah. So anyway, that was a placard for lowering the aft Airstairs. Then in 2017, 2 more pieces of possible evidence were discovered by a team of volunteer investigators. As mentioned in a New York Daily News article by Megan Cerullo titled, FBI Accepts New Evidence in DB Cooper Hijacking Cold Case. First, a parachute strap that could be several decades old was found. Then, in August of that year, a piece of foam was found that potentially, I'll stress that there, could be part of Cooper's backpack. However, these 2 newer items can't be confirmed as being directly linked to Cooper, but they're exciting finds.
Yeah, it's kind of thin for me, but I don't know a lot about these 2. I heard about the foam somewhere.
Right.
I don't think I knew about the parachute strap.
I think officially, they think it's a parachute strap, and I don't know if it's dated, I don't know, but you're right about that, is that it's pretty cool that you found something that might be connected, but you can't officially connect it. So the official stance is that, yes, those are possibles. We'll take a look at them.
But you know what we have to talk about now? If we're going to talk about this, a little bit earlier than this, 2008, a part of 2 parachutes was found near Amboy, Washington.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to read you this little section right here. This is from the Mountain News, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Great website for Cooper information. Just tons of, it's a great publication. We have links to it, but this is one of the stories there. A discarded parachute buried near DB Cooper's probable landing zone was found in 2008 near Amboy, Washington. After some investigation that included the opinion of Cooper parachute packer, Earl Cossey, the FBI determined it was not the Cooper parachute, but probably from a military pilot who bailed out of an airplane in the same area in 1945. Maybe. There are problems with this scenario, though. No one at the FBI has said for certain the found parachute isn't Cooper's, not even Earl Cossey. They use words such as highly unlikely, even though they admit the style of parachute that was found could be from a Navy Backpack 6 container, the same container that Cooper jumped with from the plane. However, the parachute found near Amboy was missing the harness and the container. Only the silk was buried, and there is no indication the military pilot buried it. According to an old article in the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, the pilot built a fire to keep warm after he reached the ground and then walked out to safety 9 miles in the morning. It's doubtful he would have bothered burying it during the night. And even if he had, why would he separate the container and harness from the parachute? He did not walk out with these items either. He left the entire package behind, yet no container or harness was ever found, even after additional digging in the area by the FBI. So that's an interesting thing. And there's actually a section 2 in one of the books that I read called Into the Blast that talks about this. This is the true story of DB Cooper, Into the Blast. That's written by Skip Porteous and Robert Blevins, who comes up frequently. And he has a footnote here where he says, no one really knows where Cooper landed, although there have been some good guesses. The Woodland area, which is a town, is very small, but so is Ariel, Washington, or perhaps the small village of Amboy, the place where a buried parachute was unearthed in 2008. That's all he really says about that there. But that parachute is of interest. And I'll just tell you now, there's a forum called the DZ for Drop Zone. Tons of stuff on there about DB Cooper. Yeah. We'll have a link to that forum. I mean, it's just on and on and on. These guys all are way more into it than we've been able to get. But there's a whole thread I remember reading with speculation about the color of the chute, the color of what was found, the color of what he took, the color of the silk that was left on the plane, and also about Cossey not necessarily clearly remembering what he packed or where he got it. So there's just all kinds of, it's a mishmash of information. So it's hard to connect that. But it is interesting that just the silk was buried, because to me, if he came down and he had problems stowing the money, it makes sense that maybe he would have separated the silk from the container to put money in the container to hike out with.
Well, you know what? These things happen.
Yes.
And I mean finding of strange things. When you go looking for Flight 19, you find another airplane similar you weren't intending to find.
Yeah.
Weird stuff happens.
Yeah.
And stuff that's missing, it's like, well, you weren't expecting to find another plane of the same make, and you do, and it's like, wait, was this missing? Again, it's like Amelia Earhart. It's like all these things that go disappearing, strange things are found in their stead. That happened on an episode of UFO Hunters, I believe. They were trying to look at USOs. That's the old show, which I really enjoyed.
Yes, Bill Burns, right?
Yes, Bill Burns, and it just looked like a lot of fun. I would love to just hang out at that office and shoot the breeze and go on adventures. But they went to Catalina Island looking for a something that may have downed a plane, some USO that may have affected a plane that was reported being down. They take a dive. They find another plane that had gone down, not the one they were looking for. That's my point, is that you go looking for stuff, or when people are actively looking for one thing, you end up finding something else that is very similar, not maybe exactly the same.
Yes.
Maybe that's what's at Buka. I don't know. Well, the reason that this is important is that there are only 2 pieces of evidence found outside of the aircraft, which are the samples of ransom money from Tina Bar, the Columbia River, and the Airstairs placard. That's it. That's all people have really got to go on at this point.
It's less than MH370. Not much coming back on that one either.
Oh, well, wing though, and some barnacles, right?
I think so. I'm not positive that wing was positively identified, but
that washed up on the
really
French
do that show.
Right?
Yeah, we got to do that show.
It's interesting. You find a lot more questions than answers. That's what we've got here. But so that's why there's so much scrutiny on these. Well, not even the placard, really the money. That's it. That's going to yield the most answers, maybe, or just generate more questions like the paranormal in general.
Breaking up with your old wireless provider just got a whole lot easier thanks to Mint Mobile. They were the first company to sell premium wireless service online only, and now, and I want everyone to listen to me closely, Mint Mobile is introducing their unlimited data plan for just $30 a month. Let that sink in.
What Scott just said is totally true. for once. An unlimited plan for $30 a month. How much is your soon-to-be ex-wireless provider charging you? Come on, do the math. If you switch today, how much will you save by Christmas? And look, I know for a fact there are people out there who could afford a new car if their cell phone bills were that low.
I can say, and I've said this before without any hesitation, that before our family switched over to Mint Mobile, we had bills upwards of $400 a month sometimes.
Woo!
Data overages after data overages. It's maddening.
Well, it certainly sounds that way. Well, for people who hate their cell phone bills and are ready to cut ties with the big budget-busting wireless companies, Mint Mobile offers their premium unlimited plan for just $30 a month. Scott and I have put this service to the test many times over on special remote interviews and all kinds of adventures for the show, and Mint Mobile has never let us down.
Well, what do you get for $30 a month? Well, friends, it just gets better and better. All plans come with Mint Mobile's unlimited talk and text, high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network, and yes, use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone number along with all your existing contacts.
And if you're not 100% satisfied, Mint Mobile has you covered with their 7-day money-back guarantee.
Break up with Big Wireless and switch to Mint Mobile's premium unlimited data plan for $30 a month.
To get your new unlimited wireless plan for just $30 a month and get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/AL.
That's mintmobile.com/AL. Cut your unlimited wireless bill to $30 a month at mintmobile.com/AL.
Did you know that Miller High Life has been brewed the same way since New Year's Eve, 1903? I should know, I was there. Actually, I would love to time travel, and actually, that would have been a good one. Yeah. 1903? Well, the inspiration for the beer was that anyone, no matter your status, should have a glass of quality beer to raise in honor of a simple life well lived on New Year's Eve. Everyone should celebrate the good life.
Yeah, it's true. It's kind of hard these days sometimes. What is the good life? Here we are huddled in our homes. We keep hearing about the new normal. And for so long now, the good life has been defined by social status, wealth, popularity, and power. But no doubt, back in 1903, they had way less quality of life then, but they still found a reason to be fulfilled.
Don't knock those odd-year people, okay? It's all about the little day-to-day accomplishments, the satisfaction of a job well done, having great neighbors or scoring an awesome camping site, finally getting around to repainting the trim or just breathing in the fresh air from a cold snap. It's time we all take notice of the quiet treasures we enjoy. No excuses.
You're absolutely right, my friend. We're so easily distracted by nonsense that does nothing to bring more joy into our lives, which is why I really have come to respect Miller High Life, not only as a brand, but a great beer. It's unpretentious. It's a family. It's not trying to be anything other than a great beer created specifically for the purpose of honoring the simple and good things in life. It may sound corny, but honestly, just seeing that iconic bottle there in my fridge is a reminder that I need to stop and take a moment to appreciate.
Well, for me, really, the best part about it is just, it's so drinkable. You've heard of drinkability, right?
Yes, No, I haven't actually.
But
I'll go
good.
with you on that. I agree with you. Yeah, it does taste good.
There's some beers you want to stop after one. I'll just say that. Well, look, after we record today, I plan to toss a couple of Miller High Lifes in the cooler, head down to the courtyard where all the neighbors hang out with our chairs appropriately spaced, and of course, just see who shows up. Well, who am I kidding? I'm not doing that. I will raise my beer out the window to them and then enjoy the Miller High Life by myself, as I usually like to do. Well, look, however you enjoy it, just have a good chat with people, and that's good enough. Just meet with somebody or enjoy it at home. Whatever you want to do, really. Seriously, what better end of the day than that?
Yeah, just look out the window like Forrest does and have your neighbors rapidly close their blinds, being like, what? What are you looking at?
That's exactly the outcome I'm hoping for.
Big or small, celebrate with Miller High Life, the champagne of beers, a quality beer within everyone's reach.
And please, celebrate responsibly. Miller Brewing Company, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
I'm Sam Clements, and this is Astonishing Legends. Let's get back to the show.
So now we've heard a little bit about the FBI investigator's stance on the findings and the evidence so far. But before we take a look at their conclusions and profiling of possible suspects, let's review the other clues and leads first, as it will determine what's most likely with each of the more popular suspects.
Well, the FBI considers the descriptions of Cooper given by the flight attendants Florence Schaffner and Tina Mucklow and the resulting composite sketches to be accurate and reliable. Remember, they spent the most amount of time with Cooper in a situation where they were undoubtedly taking him in. Also, remember that they were interviewed soon after, both on the same night and in different cities, and gave nearly identical descriptions. So did people who encountered him on the ground. The official general description is as follows. And again, this is from Special Agent Lawrence Carr or Larry Carr. He led the investigation team for the FBI in the Seattle field office from 2006 until the case was more or less closed in 2016. Although I did read about a new agent who maybe he's just a liaison, but we can drill down on that later. Quote, the two flight attendants who spent the most time with him on the plane were interviewed separately the same night in separate cities and gave nearly identical descriptions, says Carr.
Yeah.
They both said he was about 5'10 to 6 feet, 170 to 180 pounds, in his mid-40s with brown eyes. People on the ground who came into contact with him also gave very similar descriptions.
Yes, and you're forgetting maybe a romantic twist. I don't know. They said he had piercing brown eyes and swarthy skin.
Swarthy skin.
I'm not sure where that came up, but you'll see that in some descriptions too.
There was only 3 significant items of evidence on the plane after he jumped. The black tie, which had a mother of pearl tie clip on it, and that was a clip-on tie, and 8 Raleigh brand filtered cigarette butts. The public didn't know about the tie and the tie clip until the publishing of a book called DB Cooper, The Real McCoy in 1991 by author Bernie Rhodes. The cigarette butts have since been lost. Also lost to date are the remaining 9,710 $20 bills. None of them have turned up anywhere, but their serial numbers are online for public view, so you can check the ones in your possession to see if any match. Have you ever tried the Where's George database? That's pretty crazy. I have done that, but I've never had a single bill come back. I did it I even bought a little stamp, and I to stamp it, which I guess is a federal offense to deface the dollar.
Possibly. Well, you're not ripping it up. But
I put them in the database. I think I still have a profile there, and none have ever been entered again. I don't think. I should go back. I haven't logged in about 10 years.
Oh, I have. I have. I've seen mine show up before.
Oh, really?
Well, after me. Yeah. I just make a note of it. You log it. You make a note of it. You see where it travels. It's pretty fascinating, I think. But here's something interesting. According to that link, I think from the DB Cooper forum website, that bill certification place, PCGS, that I mentioned earlier, the banknote third-party certification service, they apparently found some serial numbers that are not part of that original set that was recorded. So that was an interesting point, is that whoever did it, the C First Bank or maybe the FBI to some stories, they didn't get them all, but then the money was confirmed as being Cooper's. Again, there's so many little weird, odd things that don't line up or contradict each other. If that's not the case, say that C First did accurately record every serial number that was given to Cooper, but there's some serial numbers in this pack that are not with that, and that has been accurately noted by PCGS. Where do those come from? Did somebody find those, slip those in? Were they mixed up with another batch of money by someone else or by Cooper? You see, every little thing turns it into a different story.
Just to give you a quick note, I have entered $31 worth of bills into Where's George. It's the first time I've logged in several years. None of them have hit back.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, nobody's keeping up with it.
Nobody cares about my money.
Anyway, there are so many variables. I'm about to describe one that is a sad and horrible note. And it was something in connection to the original manhunt and the massive search that was done by the FBI and the military. A body was found, and this is mentioned in retired FBI agent Ralph Himmelsbach's book, and also an article in the Columbian newspaper. This story is profiled, and also on a webpage for waymarking.com. We'll have that, and I think that's a orienteering club activity website, I believe. Well, there was a crime on March 29th, 1972, and I'll just read the entry from the waymarking site here. A body was found at the old Cedar Creek grist mill in a remote wooded area in northern Clark County. A woman searching for old bottles spotted the body partially covered by debris. The corpse attracted nationwide attention until it was determined the body was that of a young woman and not the missing jetliner hijacker DB Cooper. The unidentified body was found in an area that had been included in an intensive search by the FBI and Army for DB Cooper, the man believed to have parachuted from a hijacked jetliner with the ransom money. The hijacker is believed to have parachuted in the area east of Woodland. The body was located at the bottom of a 25-foot silo-like structure that is built into the side of the grist mill and had been part of the water turbine. So yes, this is at the old Cedar Creek grist mill in Woodland, Washington. Sadly, she was murdered. By Monday, April 3rd, the grist mill body had been identified as 18-year-old Barbara Ann Derry, a Clark College student from the Goldendale, Washington area. Barbara Ann had enrolled at Clark College in January for the winter quarter, but not for the spring quarter. And she had rented an apartment in the Central Park neighborhood, but had moved out in mid-February, presumably to return to Goldendale. But no one had reported her missing. Now, what's the point of us describing that? Well, one, a massive FBI, gigantic military search is taking place all around this area. Nobody checks the grist mill. This woman and maybe her friend, I think, were looking for old bottles, which is a pastime a lot of people do. And they poke around this place and they find this body. And it's not out in the middle of the woods. It's not in the middle of a copse of trees or on a craggy bluff somewhere. It is in a structure that should have been checked but wasn't. Or if it was, it wasn't thoroughly. The other thing is that poor Barbara Ann Derry went missing and nobody noticed for whatever reason. Her friends didn't say anything. Family didn't notice. Nobody made mention of it. And she had to be identified by other means. So there's two things here. If Cooper was in the woods and he didn't make it, his body's just out there somewhere in the woods, well, it's easy to overlook. Secondly, is that whoever Cooper was, he went missing for at least a little while and nobody noticed him gone. If he didn't make it out of the woods, then he's gone forever. And he must know somebody, unless he was a total loner. And again, that happens. That's our first podcast episode was about who, Scott?
Yvette Vickers.
Yvette Vickers passed away 6 months in her house by herself. No one noticed she had passed away. So these weird things happened. But that's why I wanted to mention this earlier, and that you think, like, to your question towards the beginning of the episode, if he was just a body somewhere, what do you think that means? That nothing was found ever? Is he just, again, in such a hung up in a tree? Is he in such dense wood and underbrush that he just gets swallowed up by the forest and that's it? Or did he make it out of there and die somewhere else or live another life?
No, it's a good question. And by the way, east of Woodland, about 30 minutes east of Woodland is Amboy, where that parachute was found.
Exactly.
And a little bit more than halfway between the two is Ariel, where they celebrate DB Cooper Day every year because they think he came down there. So we're in the hood there. We're in the hood.
We're in the hood, but as I said earlier, pilot William Scott thought his calculations were off, that he was actually flying further east, I believe. And Lake Merwin is one area just south of there, and that includes the Ariel area. The other one is Washougal River area. So if you look on a map, you'll see these places differ, but that's a lot of ground to cover if you're off by a little bit with your calculations.
Yeah.
And it's very dense, and some of it's not very accessible. So it makes a big deal where one body, if he didn't make it, is now stashed and may never be found.
Well, coming back to the FBI's findings and disclosures there, they actually found 3 DNA samples from Cooper's black tie in 2001, 1 large sample and 2 small samples, making up a partial DNA profile. And they made this disclosure in 2007. However, FBI Special Agent Fred Gutt, G-U-T-T, stated that it was difficult to draw any firm conclusions from the samples because they couldn't verify that the samples actually came from Cooper. The FBI also disclosed to the public previously classified evidence, such as other composite sketches, details and facts on the case, and a photo of Cooper's $20 plane ticket on Northwest from Portland to Seattle. They also released information on the parachutes. Cooper had a choice of 2 primary chutes, and we talked about this a little bit in part 1. He didn't choose the professional sport parachute, which would have been better. He chose the older chute. he also chose the demonstration parachute from the 2 reserve parachutes, which actually was sewn shut, didn't have a working ripcord, and was intended to train skydiving students. By the way, and I'm sure some skydiving people are going to email us, it's beyond me how you train with a parachute that doesn't open and is sewn shut. Just for the record.
It's in the class. Look, if you pull the rip, now you've got a huge, big ball of silk in the classroom. It's meant to train for other stuff.
Okay.
So,
well, it just seems like one of those things you might accidentally jump out of a plane with, and it's not going to help you. So I'm just saying, why is this even in this scenario?
We're going to get to more reasons for that, and maybe why it was a mix-up, or some people thinking it wasn't. But there are a lot of things that happened by accident here. So the point being is that, we'll repeat this again. And again, I need repeating because I often forget these details. But if Cooper was really the crackerjack, skydiving paratrooper, man of action, he wouldn't have grabbed that one because there were signs on it. Now, I don't know if it was totally labeled or, as you'll see in some military canvas things, where it's spray painted or it's got a patch that's sewn onto it telling you what it is. But as it's reported, there were clear signs to an experienced skydiver that this is a dummy shoot. It's a practice shoot. You're not going to want to take that one with you. And also, to clear that up, and you confirm with me, people might see this who haven't gone skydiving, that when you're not tandem jumping with somebody, on your back is the main chute. The reserve chute, you'll see kind of a pouch that's in front.
Yeah.
The back one doesn't open. The reserve chute's the one in front. And that's what we're talking about. I'm not sure if we cleared that up before, but the one in front is the reserve chute.
Right.
And so what Cooper was asking for was 2 primary chutes, the big ones in the back, and 2 backup chutes, the one you wear in the front.
Right.
Yeah, that's a weird again, that's another weird thing I can't get over. Like, why did he take that one if he knew what he was doing? Maybe he had a plan for it. Who knows? But as I said, an experienced skydiver, as the authorities would say, like, they would notice the markings on it, that it was a demo unit. Cooper used the other backup working parachute to cut cords from it. And the FBI thinks, again, like you said before, to tie the money bag shut or secure.
Yeah, because he didn't get the backpack he wanted, the knapsack.
Right. And he was a little miffed about that, right?
Yeah, because now he's having to improvise.
Right. In a short amount of time. Plus, he must have some idea. He's not going to wait all the way until they get to Reno to jump out.
Right.
So the other part is that the cords that he cannibalized from the other one is probably what Tina Mucklow saw him wrapping around himself. So he uses some of the cord to secure the bag with the money in it. And the other part he's actually wrapping to himself because it could be kind of hard to hold on to. Although I think he's seen a lot of cartoons. He's just holding it's like he's got a briefcase, he's holding the handle.
Yeah, and I remember reading, God, now I can't remember where this was. It couldn't be factual because nobody could know this. But I remember reading that what you would do is you would jump out holding it, and then you would release it, the money, the bundle, so that it would be below you, connected to you, but below you, and hit the ground before you.
Interesting. Yeah. I do wonder about that when I go to make my leaping getaway.
Yes.
Somewhere. I'm not going to rob anybody. They're just, I don't,
Yeah.
I don't want that on my record. I'm trying to keep my my decent credit score going. So, but I think one day if I get just too decrepit, I'll just go missing in a 411 kind of thing. So, letting you know right now.
Yeah.
Well, one last thing about the parachutes, as we stated earlier, you could think maybe the FBI gave him the dummy chute, thinking that if he takes that one, that's we'll just have to go scoop him up.
Right.
But according to them, they wanted to state that they did not intentionally give Cooper the demonstration parachute, hoping he'd choose it and it'd kill him. They said it was mistakenly given to them during the rush to get 4 from the skydiving school.
Well, and that would have been a colossal mistake because the FBI, as far as they knew and as far as anyone knew, might have thought that he was requesting the extra chutes because he was going to take someone with him. And if he was going to take a flight attendant or a crew member with him, how could they know who would get the dummy chute? So it does make sense to me that they wouldn't have intentionally done that because they had to be thinking, oh, he's going to make somebody jump with him.
Right.
And they're not going to sacrifice a random person.
That goes into, again, part of the profiling is that why the 4 chutes was that to make them think, who knows? He could take people with him.
Well, because if he asked for one, think about it. If he asked for one, they sabotage it and he jumps out and he's dead. If he asked for 2, I don't know. I think when by increasing the numbers, he makes him think maybe he's going to take the whole crew with him and then blow up the plane or something.
Yeah.
So they can't take the risk of giving a faulty chute to them.
Right.
Not knowingly anyway, in my opinion. So the FBI announced that a group of specialist citizen volunteers, later known as the Cooper Research Team, was formed in March of 2009, and this consisted of a paleontologist from the Burke Museum of Natural History and Culture in Seattle. His name's Tom Kay, a metallurgist named Alan Stone, and a scientific illustrator named Carol Abrazinkas. And part of the team helping was veteran Cooper researcher and Brian Ingram, who found the Columbia River Bank ransom money 30 years earlier at the time of the group's formation. Now, Tom Kay was usually searching for dinosaur bones in Wyoming, but he and his team were now using GPS and satellite maps and technology like electron microscopes to examine things like pollen on Cooper's tie that could be traced to a specific region of the country. Lycopodium spores, also known as ground pines or creeping cedars, were found on the tie, but could be from the plant or a pharmaceutical product. Kay also conducted soil and water samples from the site on the Columbia River, among other tests and calculations, like retracing the flight path to get it more exact and floating a stack of dollar bills on a fishing line to confirm if the money could have floated downstream or if it was more likely it was buried by Cooper. Now, using advanced technology not available in the 70s, they were able to also identify trace particles on Cooper's tie with electron microscopy, like pure titanium, unalloyed, which was rare in the 70s. Back then, it was mainly used in chemical companies and metal production facilities, so Cooper may have been an engineer, technician, or manager at a specialized company that dealt with titanium in fabrication or scrap, and someone who'd be wearing a tie at one of those facilities. As recently as January 2017, the Cooper research team also found traces of bismuth, aluminum, and rare earth minerals like cerium and strontium sulfide, which were rarely used in the 1970s, except for places like Boeing with their supersonic transport development project. So he could have been a Boeing employee or worked for Portland companies like Teledyne and Tektronix, which manufactured cathode ray tubes for monitors. That's not the only thing this team found, though. They found something that the FBI missed when they first reported about the dredging in the area that would have put a timestamp on when the money could have arrived. But we're going to save that for the newly created and recently invented Part 3.
Yes, which will end up on a muddy bank somewhere, never to be heard, or in your feeds.
That's going to wrap up part 2 of our 3-part series on DB Cooper. Originally, we were planning to keep it to 2 parts, but we were running long, and it's 3 a.m. So we're going to release part 3 commercial-free next week.
Please remember to support our sponsors. They help keep the show free and the lights on in Blanket Fortiana.
Special thanks to John Boland.
Hi, I'm Sam Clements.
Hi, I'm James Copper.
Hello, my precious. Too tinny, too echoey, I don't know.
N-E-T-S.
I listen to Astonishing Legends.
Our show is edited by Sarah Voorhees Wendell and co-produced by Tess Feifel, who is also our head of research.
Our theme, which is available as a ringtone, was composed by Judson Crane, and our sound design and additional composing is by Ryan McCullough.
Special thanks to the Astonishing Research Corps.
But most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Visit our store at astonishinglegends.com or interact with us and other listeners on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
You can also support the show at patreon.com/astonishinglegends, where patrons have access to additional bonus content. No part of this show may be reproduced anywhere without permission. Copyright Astonishing Legends Productions.
Good night.